The wind screamed through the narrow streets of District 9 like a living creature, hungry and relentless. Seraphine pressed her iridescent blue wings tighter around her children, creating a fragile cocoon against the elements. Rain pelted the salvaged metal sheets that formed their makeshift roof, each drop hitting like small hammers threatening to tear through their last defense. "Mother, the water is coming inside again," 6-year-old Ember whispered, her copper scales dimmed by exhaustion and cold. The young dragon tried to sound brave, but her voice trembled. Seraphine looked down at her eldest daughter, then at Azure, her 4-year-old son whose silver scales had lost their natural shimmer weeks ago. Little Opal, barely 2 years old, slept fitfully against her chest, whimpering softly in dreams that offered no escape from their harsh reality. The purple hue of Opal's scales had faded to a sickly gray, and that terrified Seraphine more than anything else. "I know, my flame," Seraphine murmured, adjusting her position to shield them better. Her own scales, once brilliant sapphire that caught sunlight like precious gems, were now dulled by grime and desperation. "The storm will pass. It always does." But even as she spoke the words, she felt the main support beam shudder. She had scavenged it from a demolished factory 3 weeks prior. But nothing built from garbage could withstand nature's fury forever. 4 months had passed since everything fell apart. 4 months since Darius, her beloved mate, had taken the poisoned blade meant for her heart. The assassin had been swift and cruel, hired by rivals from the old mountains who still clung to ancient feuds that should have died centuries ago. Without Darius's position as an environmental engineer, the Dragon Assembly had shown their true colors. Sympathy came easily from their forked tongues, but actual help never materialized. Their home in the upper districts had been seized within days, their savings frozen under endless investigations that existed only to avoid responsibility. Everything she had known, every safety she had built, vanished like morning mist. Seraphine had sold her grandmother's necklace first, the one passed down through 12 generations. Then Darius's technical equipment, worth more than most families earned in a year. Her translator implants went last, the biological modifications that had allowed her to work as a cross-species diplomat. Without them, she could barely communicate beyond basic common speech, making employment nearly impossible in a human-dominated district. The credits had sustained them for 6 weeks. After that came charity from distant acquaintances who remembered Darius, which lasted another 2 weeks. Then nothing remained but this tent and the desperate hope that tomorrow might bring change. Through the roar of wind and rain, a new sound emerged. The distinctive hum of an engine, struggling but determined, growing closer. Seraphine's claws flexed instinctively, reaching for the energy blade hidden beneath their threadbare blanket. It was Darius's blade, nearly depleted of power, but the threat it represented was often enough. The engine stopped nearby. Heavy footsteps followed, purposeful and direct, splashing through puddles with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where they were heading. "Anyone sheltering here?" a male voice called out, human and strong enough to carry over the storm. "Name is Tobias Brennan. I own the machine shop 2 streets over. Not here to cause problems." Seraphine remained silent, but Azure stirred against her side. "Mama?" he whispered. The footsteps halted just outside their shelter. "I can detect your heat signatures," the voice continued, somehow managing to sound both firm and gentle. "1 adult dragon, 3 younglings. And before you panic, I am not with any authorities. Just a mechanic who has noticed someone borrowing parts from my scrapyard these past few weeks." Seraphine's heart sank. She had been so careful, only taking pieces that seemed abandoned, nothing that looked valuable. But of course someone would notice. Humans always noticed when dragons took anything. "I am not concerned about the scrap," Tobias said quickly. "I am here because this storm is intensifying. Weather control systems failed in this district 2 days ago. That support beam you are using will not last another hour. When it fails in these winds, well, you understand what happens next." Seraphine understood perfectly. The shelter would collapse, the rain would soak through everything, and in the cold of a city night, wet scales meant hypothermia for her babies. Dragon children could not regulate temperature like adults, especially when malnourished. "What is your price?" Seraphine finally asked, her voice carrying the harmonic undertone of her species like distant thunder beneath words. "Shelter for tonight," Tobias replied simply. "I have a storage room behind my shop. Used to house equipment before I converted it. Basic walls, solid roof, door that locks from inside. Not fancy, but dry and warm. Nothing is free in District 9. True enough, Tobias agreed. I need help with precision work. Delicate circuit repairs, fine calibration. These hands, she heard fingers tapping against metal, are not as steady as they once were. I have watched you work with salvage. Dragons have naturally superior fine motor control. Those claws could thread circuits a microscope would struggle to see. I know nothing about human machinery, Seraphine protested, though her grip on the blade loosened slightly. But you understand dragon technology, Tobias countered. That shelter is held together with a modified climate regulator from old transport systems. You built a moisture collector from a damaged environment suit, lady. You have accomplished more with refuse than trained technicians manage with full workshops. A violent gust struck at that moment, and the support beam finally snapped with a crack like breaking bone. Seraphine caught the falling sheets with her spread wings, holding them up through pure determination, but she knew she could not maintain it. Please, Tobias said, urgency entering his voice. Those children need shelter. This storm will worsen before dawn. Let me help. Just for tonight, a real roof overhead. Opal woke then, sensing her mother's distress, and began crying with the distinctive keening trill of young dragons, a sound of primal fear that spoke of separation and danger. It was the cry younglings made when the world became too large and too threatening. Hush, little gem, Seraphine crooned, but exhaustion cracked her voice. She could not hold the shelter much longer. Her wings, damaged in a fight for food 2 weeks prior, burned with pain. I will step back now, Tobias said. My shop is the blue building with the neon sign, though half the letters are broken. Back entrance has a green door. It is unlocked. The choice is yours. She heard him retreat, heard his engine start and fade into the storm. Seraphine held the shelter for 30 more seconds, counting each one as her strength failed. Then the sheets collapsed around them like a dying creature and rain soaked them instantly. Ember gasped but did not cry, trying so hard to be strong. Azure whimpered. Opal's cries became screams of cold and fear. Come, Seraphine said, gathering her children close and wrapping them in her damaged wings. We are going inside. But mother, he is human, Ember said. Yes, Seraphine agreed, pulling them upright as rain hit like ice needles. But he is also right. We cannot survive this night. She grabbed their only bag, waterproof material holding their identification chips, 3 sets of clothing that barely fit anymore, and a photo crystal with images from better days. Then she guided her children into the storm. The blue building appeared through the rain, its broken neon sign flickering weakly. The green door stood slightly open, warm yellow light spilling out like an invitation. The walk took less than 2 minutes, but felt like crossing an ocean. By the time they reached the door, Opal had gone dangerously quiet, her body shutting down to preserve heat. Seraphine did not hesitate. She pushed through into blessed warmth and dryness. The space was exactly as described, industrial but clean. Concrete walls painted neutral beige, a polymer roof that held firm, steady fluorescent lighting. A workbench lined one wall covered in organized tools. A small kitchen area occupied a corner. An old couch sat against the far wall, and beside it, a stack of thermal blankets that looked suspiciously new. Tobias sat at the workbench, hands wrapped around a steaming mug, carefully not looking at them as they dripped on his floor. He was younger than his voice suggested, perhaps late 30s, with brown hair already showing gray from stress rather than age. His face bore scars of his trade, a burn on one cheek, a crooked nose from an old break. He wore practical clothes, a mechanic's jumpsuit with multiple pockets and heavy boots that had been resoled several times. Blankets are clean, he said without turning. Kitchen has protein synthesizer. Not gourmet, but nutritionally complete for younglings. Showers through that door. Hot water is limited but available. Why? Seraphine asked, still standing inside the door with her children pressed against her legs. Now Tobias did turn, and his brown eyes were tired but genuinely kind. 28 years ago, a dragon pulled my father from a collapsed building after an earthquake. Never asked for anything, never gave a name. Just pulled him free, checked his breathing, and flew away. He lived another 12 years because of that stranger. He took a sip from his mug. I know it was not you. I know you owe me nothing, but perhaps kindness does not need more reason than itself. Azure tugged on Seraphine's wing. Mama, I am so hungry. That simple statement shattered Seraphine's defenses more effectively than any threat. Her children were hungry, cold and frightened. She could maintain her suspicion, or she could feed them. Framed that way, no choice existed at all. "Thank you," she said quietly, then louder. "Thank you, Tobias Brennan." "Just Tobias," he corrected gently. "And you are welcome." "Seraphine," she offered, moving toward the blankets. "These are Ember, Azure, and Opal." Tobias nodded to each child with solemn respect, as if meeting them at a formal gathering rather than while they dripped rainwater on his floor. "Honored to meet you all. Now how about some food?" Morning arrived with gentle sunlight filtering through high windows, painting golden streaks across the concrete floor. Seraphine woke slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar sensation of actual comfort. The couch beneath her was worn but soft, and her children were piled around her like they used to do in their old apartment, warm and breathing steadily. For the first time in months, she had slept more than a few hours. Ember was already awake, sitting up and looking around the workshop with curious copper eyes. Azure remained asleep, curled into a tight ball with his tail wrapped around himself. Little Opal snored softly against Seraphine's chest, her purple scales already showing more color than they had in weeks. A gentle knock sounded on the connecting door. "Morning," Tobias called through. "I brought breakfast from the corner bakery. Real bread, not synthesized. Are you decent?" Seraphine glanced at her children, still wrapped in thermal blankets but awake and alert. Ember nodded, trying to appear brave. She moved to the door and unlocked it. Tobias entered carrying a box that smelled absolutely divine. Fresh bread, something sweet with honey, and the rich aroma of real coffee, not the synthetic substitute that dominated District 9. He set everything on the small table, then stepped back respectfully. "Figured you might want something besides protein paste," he said. "The bakery is run by a stubborn old woman named Rosa, who refuses to give up her family recipes. This neighborhood would be darker without her." "This must have cost considerable credits," Seraphine said carefully, then stopped. Discussing the expense of kindness seemed ungrateful. "Consider it an investment," Tobias replied, moving to his workbench and pulling out a digital tablet. "I meant what I said about needing help. Look at this." He showed her the screen, displaying a three-dimensional schematic of a hoverbike's propulsion system. The detail was remarkable, every circuit and connection mapped in holographic precision. But she could see the problems immediately. Several quantum field stabilizers were misaligned, and the power distribution network had microscopic fractures that would cause cascading failures. "You see it, right?" Tobias asked, watching her eyes track across the schematic. "The problems. I can see them too, but these hands," he held up fingers that trembled slightly even at rest, "cannot fix them anymore. Not with the precision required." "The stabilizers need molecular-level realignment," Seraphine said, her technical mind engaging despite her caution. "And those fractures require at least 12 hours of detailed work to repair properly." "Exactly," Tobias smiled, transforming his scarred face. "That bike belongs to a corporate executive from District 2. She is paying triple rate for rush repair. If you can fix it, that generates enough credits to keep this place running for a month." "And my percentage?" Seraphine asked, having learned to be direct about such matters. 40%, Tobias said immediately. "Plus room and board for you and the children. Plus access to my tools and workshop for side projects. Plus I teach you human technology properly, so you are not dependent only on me for work." It was generous. Too generous. Seraphine's scales rippled with suspicion. "What is the catch?" "The catch," Tobias said, setting down the tablet, "is that if authorities discover I am employing an undocumented dragon, I could lose my license. The catch is that if your enemies find you here, my shop becomes a target. The catch is that I am betting on you being as skilled as I think, and if I am wrong, I lose a very valuable client." "Then why risk it?" Tobias was quiet for a moment, looking out at the brightening sky. "Because I am 41 years old, have been alone since my wife left 6 years ago, and have spent every day since just going through motions. Fix machines, go home, sleep, repeat. Then I saw you 3 weeks ago taking apart that old climate unit with your bear claws, repurposing it into something that should not have worked but did. You created something from nothing. You kept your children alive in a place that kills grown adults. That is not just skill. That is artistry. He turned back to her. I am not seeking anything inappropriate before your mind goes there. I am looking for a business partner. Someone who can do what I cannot anymore. Someone who perhaps needs what I can offer. Stability, safety, a chance to rebuild. Opal chose that moment to toddle over to Tobias, drawn by the smell of honey bread. She looked up at him with huge violet eyes, then raised her arms in the universal gesture for up. Tobias looked startled, glancing at Seraphine for permission. When she nodded slightly, he carefully picked up the little dragon, holding her like she was made of crystal. Heavy for such a small one, he said, and Opal trilled happily, reaching for the bread with eager claws. She likes you, Azure said, sounding puzzled. She does not like anyone except Mother. Perhaps she just likes my breakfast, Tobias said, but he was smiling as Opal settled against his chest, munching contentedly on a piece he tore off for her. Over the following weeks, a routine developed that felt both foreign and comforting. Seraphine would wake before dawn, check her sleeping children, then slip into the workshop where Tobias would already be organizing the day's projects. He taught her patiently, explaining differences between dragon and human technology, showing her how to use tools her claws had never been designed for, but which her natural dexterity made her surprisingly adept with. The hoverbike for the District 2 executive became their first major success. Seraphine spent 16 hours straight on the repairs, her claws steady where Tobias's hands would have shaken, her dragon eyes able to perceive microscopic flaws that human vision would miss. When the executive collected it, she was so impressed she commissioned 4 more repairs immediately. Word spread through the peculiar network that existed in lower districts, whispered recommendations and careful referrals. Soon they had more work than they could handle. Tobias managed clients and diagnostics while Seraphine performed the delicate repairs. The children thrived in the safe environment. Ember began helping with simple tasks, learning to organize tools and clean components. Azure discovered a talent for sketching technical diagrams. Even little Opal became the unofficial shop mascot, charming clients with her innocent curiosity. One evening, after a particularly long day, Tobias and Seraphine sat in the workshop sharing synthesized tea. The children were asleep in the back room, fed and safe and content. I have been thinking, Tobias said carefully. This arrangement is working well. Better than I hoped. But it is still temporary, legally speaking. If you want something more permanent, more secure, I could sponsor you for a work visa. It would take time and credits, but it would make everything official. Seraphine stared at him. Why would you do that? The paperwork alone would take months. The fees would consume most of our profits. Because those children deserve stability, Tobias said simply. Because you deserve to not live in fear. And because honestly, I have not felt this purposeful in years. This shop was just a job before. Now it feels like something more. Like family, maybe. Tears gathered in Seraphine's eyes, the first she had allowed herself since Darius died. I do not know what to say. Say yes, Tobias smiled. Say we keep building this together. Say that maybe, sometimes good things can happen even in District 9. Yes, Seraphine whispered. Yes to all of it. They worked late into the night that evening, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The shop hummed with quiet productivity, 2 beings from different species finding common ground in circuits and gears and shared purpose and growing trust. Outside, District 9 continued its harsh existence, but inside Tobias's workshop something rare was taking root. Hope. The children grew stronger each day. Ember's copper scales regained their shine. Azure started laughing again, a sound Seraphine had feared she might never hear. Opal followed Tobias around like a devoted shadow, chattering in her broken mixture of draconic and common speech. One afternoon, a regular client named Vincent, a transport driver who brought them consistent work, pulled Seraphine aside. You know people are talking, right? Dragon and human working together making some of the best repairs in 3 districts. Some folks admire it. Others think it is strange. And you? Seraphine asked carefully. Vincent grinned. I think it is about time someone proved that scales or skin do not matter when you are good at what you do. Keep proving them wrong. That night, as Seraphine tucked her children into their beds, real beds that Tobias had helped her assemble, Ember looked up at her. Mother, is Tobias our family now? Seraphine considered the question carefully. Family was a sacred concept among dragons, not given lightly. But as she thought about Tobias teaching Azure to read technical manuals, about him singing off key lullabies to Opal when Seraphine was too exhausted, about him standing beside her as an equal partner, she realized the answer was obvious. Yes, little flame, she said softly. I think perhaps he is. 3 months into their partnership, everything seemed almost too perfect. The shop was thriving, the children were healthy, and Seraphine had begun to believe that maybe, finally, they were safe. She should have known better. The trouble arrived on a cold morning when frost painted patterns on the workshop windows. Seraphine was working on a complex navigation system repair when the shop's front bell chimed. She looked up to see 3 dragons enter, their scales marking them as Mountain Clan, the same faction that had sent the assassin who killed Darius. Tobias was at the counter. Welcome. How can I help you today? The lead dragon, a male with dark green scales and cold amber eyes, ignored him entirely, his gaze fixed on Seraphine. Seraphine Wind Whisper. The council requests your presence. There are matters regarding your mate's death that require resolution. Seraphine's blood turned to ice. I have nothing to say to the council. They made their position clear when they seized everything I owned. Nevertheless, the dragon said, his tone making it clear this was not a request. You will come with us. Today. She is not going anywhere, Tobias said firmly, stepping between them. This is my shop. You are not authorized to remove anyone from my property. The dragon finally looked at Tobias, his expression one of amused contempt. Human, this does not concern you. Step aside before you are injured. No, Tobias said simply. The other 2 dragons moved forward, but before the situation could escalate, the workshop door burst open again. Vincent entered, followed by Rosa from the bakery. Then Miguel, who ran the parts supplier 2 streets over. Then a dozen other residents of District 9. They filled the small shop. Humans and dragons and various other species, all wearing expressions of determination. Problem here, Tobias? Vincent asked casually, though his hand rested on something in his jacket. The green-scaled dragon looked around, reassessing the situation. This is dragon business. It does not involve any of you. See, that is where you are wrong, Rosa said, her elderly voice sharp as a blade. Seraphine is part of this neighborhood now. You want to take her somewhere she does not want to go, you will have to go through all of us. You would start a conflict over one dragon female and her mixed-blood children? The lead dragon asked incredulously. We would start a conflict over our neighbor, Miguel corrected. Over our friend. Over someone who belongs here. You Mountain Clan types do not understand community. You only understand hierarchy and power. Well, down here in District 9, we look after our own. The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Seraphine could barely breathe, overwhelmed by the support surrounding her. These people, most of whom she barely knew beyond casual transactions, were putting themselves at risk for her family. The lead dragon stared at them for a long moment, then made a decision. The council will hear of this interference. There will be consequences. Let them hear, Tobias said. Let them know that Seraphine Wind Whisper is under my protection, under this community's protection. If the council wants to talk to her, they can send a formal legal request through proper channels. Until then, get out of my shop. The 3 Mountain Clan dragons left, but their departure felt more like a temporary retreat than a true defeat. As soon as they were gone, the gathered crowd relaxed slightly. Thank you, Seraphine said, her voice thick with emotion. All of you. I do not know how to repay this. Already paid, Vincent said with a shrug. You fixed my transport 3 times for half what anyone else would charge. We take care of each other here. After everyone dispersed, returning to their own businesses and lives, Seraphine found Tobias in the back room where the children had been hiding. He was holding Opal, who had her face buried in his shoulder while Ember and Azure clung to his legs. They will come back, Seraphine said quietly. The Mountain Clan does not give up easily. I should leave. I should take the children and go somewhere else before I bring more trouble to your door. No, Tobias said firmly. Absolutely not. We do not run from bullies. Tobias, you do not understand what they are capable of. They killed Darius. They could kill you. Then we get proper protection, Tobias said. Legal protection. We file for your work visa immediately. Not next month like we planned. We get documentation for the children. We make everything official so they cannot just grab you off the street. That costs money we do not have yet. So we borrow it, Tobias said. Miguel's brother is a lawyer. Rosa's grandson works in the visa office. Vincent knows everyone in 3 districts. We have resources, Seraphine. We have community. Let us use it. Over the next weeks, they did exactly that. Miguel's brother filed emergency protection orders. Rosa's grandson expedited paperwork that normally took months. Vincent spread word through his network that anyone threatening Tobias's shop would answer to half of District 9. The Mountain Clan sent more representatives, but each time they were met with a wall of unified resistance. The work visa came through faster than anyone expected, stamped and official. The children's documentation followed. Suddenly, for the first time since Darius died, Seraphine and her family existed legally, protected by laws rather than just the kindness of one human mechanic. The night they received the final approval, Tobias organized a celebration. The workshop filled with their neighbors bringing food and music and laughter. Someone had strung lights across the ceiling. Rosa brought a real cake, not synthesized, made with ingredients that cost more than most people in District 9 earned in a week. Ember danced with Azure, both of them laughing. Opal sat on Vincent's shoulders, clapping her little claws in delight. Seraphine found herself standing beside Tobias, watching it all with wonder. I never thought I would have this again, she said softly. Family, community, home. You deserve it, Tobias replied. You and the children. You deserve safety and happiness and a future. I could not have this without you, Seraphine said, turning to face him. You risked everything for us. Your business, your safety, your life, why? Tobias was quiet for a moment, watching the children play. My father used to say that we are defined by what we do when helping costs us something. Anyone can be kind when it is easy. Real character shows when kindness requires sacrifice, he smiled at her. Besides, you gave me something too. Purpose, family, a reason to wake up excited instead of just going through motions. We helped each other, Seraphine. That is what community means. 6 months after that storm-drenched night when she had stumbled into his workshop, Seraphine stood in that same space, but everything was different. The shop bore both their names now, officially registered as Brennan and Wind Whisper Precision Repairs. The back room had been expanded into a proper living space. Ember attended school, thriving academically. Azure had begun apprenticing with Miguel, learning parts supply. Opal spoke in full sentences now, calling Tobias Papa Toby without hesitation. One evening, as they closed the shop together, Tobias paused. I have been thinking about something. That is usually dangerous, Seraphine teased, a lightness in her voice that would have been impossible months ago. I want to make this permanent, Tobias said seriously, not just the business partnership. I want to legally adopt the children if you will allow it. I want them protected if anything happens to you. I want them to have 2 parents again, even if one of them is a clumsy human who cannot fly. Seraphine felt tears gather, but these were tears of joy. You would do that? Take on that responsibility? Seraphine, I already have, Tobias said gently.
In every way that matters, they are already mine.
I just want to make it official, to give them every protection I can. Yes, Seraphine whispered. Yes, absolutely, yes. That night, after the children were asleep, Seraphine stood on the workshop roof, looking out over District 9. The neighborhood was still poor, still struggling, still forgotten by the wealthy districts above, but it was home, real home, not just shelter. She thought of Darius, and for the first time the memory did not bring only pain. He would have liked Tobias, she realized, would have appreciated his kindness, his integrity, his devotion to family, would have been grateful that his children were safe and loved. Tobias joined her on the roof, bringing 2 cups of tea. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker like grounded stars. Thank you, Seraphine said finally, for everything, for seeing us in that storm and not looking away, for opening your door, for making us family. Thank you, Tobias countered, for trusting me, for taking a chance, for showing me that life can be more than just getting through days. Below them, District 9 continued its complicated existence, a place where poverty and community intertwined, where different species learned to coexist not through laws or mandates, but through shared struggle and mutual support. And in one small workshop, under a converted storage room roof, a dragon mother and her children had found something precious, a place to belong. Seraphine smiled, her scales catching moonlight and glowing with renewed vitality. The storm had passed, the shelter had held, and against all odds, they had found their way home. The end.